A storm was raging. It seemed that the sun had been captured by the spirit of doom, which had turned night into even darker night, with rain enough to wash away the tears of a million lifetimes. It pelted against the castle walls. Thunder echoed against the darkness, and then, suddenly, there it was. Something shrouded within a purple mist. Flickering torches growing closer, and a desperate feel of foreboding. Why were his feet so heavy? Was the ground sinking? He struggled to break free, to pull himself up, to face whatever was approaching. Then he heard his brother shouting, pleading, but he was stuck fast. Some form of magic. Rain was turning the floor into quicksand, and he was being sucked in. A moving shadow in the darkest corner of the night, but he saw, and almost caught hold of, his brother's hand, as a skeleton of a wagon, whisked him away. Then he was being smothered. Strong hands were holding him in place. A voice, muffled, desperate. His own voice. His own terror. The purple mist turned into a deep red fog, then like a fiery furnace, engulfing him, drawing him deeper in. His brother's voice came like a hollow echo. He tried to grab onto the burning crevice. Then, like a dagger to his heart, he was tossed against a terrifying nothingness. Dark. Empty. Then he was awakened by the sound of a key in the lock. There was no red fog, just a faint hint of moonlight through the window. He could see his brother sleeping beside him. The door opened. He watched as two men entered. One lit a torch. "Who are you?" asked Edward. "Where are my usual guards?" "We are your guards this night," said the second man. "And we are your escort." He tossed Edward's clothing to him. "Waken your brother and dress yourselves. There is not much time." "I am a royal prince," said Edward. "I never dress myself." "Do as I say." "Where is Miles? My servant?" No more words. Edward gave the escorts a disapproving glare. "Our uncle shall hear of this." Even as he spoke, he knew his cause was lost. Gradually, his trusted friends and servants had been dismissed, and the only person who had the power to do that was their uncle. He gently shook his brother, who looked around, vacantly, for a moment. "What is it?" asked Richard. "We must get up," Edward told him. "Why?" "I think we are being moved." "Happy birthday," said the escort, quite sneeringly, to Richard. The younger boy knew that the sentiment was not genuine. Who could have a happy birthday imprisoned in a cold tower? There had been no warmth, of any kind, in this place, since they had arrived. They both changed their clothing, under the watch of their escorts. Edward felt his skin crawling, but he tried not to let his foreboding show. They followed the torchlight down the dark stairway and along the empty corridors. Edward noticed the absence of guards. Even in the smaller hours there were usually guards posted at key points. "Where are we going?" he demanded. No answer. He stopped walking but was pushed forward by an escort. They were nearing the forecourt and he could see a covered wagon waiting. And even greater unease gripped him and he stopped again. "No," he said. "Enough." His escort took hold of him and gagged his mouth. Richard gave a slight whimper as he was also held and gagged. Both struggled but were not strong enough to resist. They were manhandled into the wagon. If anyone awoke to see the wagon leaving, they would just assume the wagon was a bit unstable. Edward guessed that the guards at the gate must have been told to let it pass because nobody came to inspect the inside. It was a rickety old cart which bobbled over the cobbles, so the journey was quite uncomfortable. Richard was sobbing silently, his face awash with tears, his head held against the floor. He thought of his mother, the good times at Ludlow Castle, his dog, their plans for his 10th birthday celebration. Their wagon smelled of rotted wood and cabbage. His escort smelled of stale sweat. He could not see his brother but he sensed his presence. There was the only shred of comfort he had. Edward had secretly expected something to happen. He had prepared himself, the best he could, reading scripture, praying, trying to believe that there had to be some purpose for everything. When his brother had been imprisoned with him, he was convinced that it was a good sign, but, as days passed, and their familiar companion began to be removed, all his hopes had faded. Now Edward remembered the dream. The wagon. His brother. The hands. His feelings. The fiery furnace. The darkness. Death. Was this to be his final dream of all? Where was the God that he had read about? He still believed, but he did not understand. Maybe true understanding could never be had until after death. From his place on the floor of the cart, Edward could see one small star in the night sky, between the clouds. He wondered about stars, how they existed, what they meant. How far away was this star? Was it really in heaven? He felt a drop of rain on the wind. He wished he could just stroll out of the wagon and get lost in the trees and grass. He knew that he could not escape without his brother, and was plunged back into hopelessness again. Their wagon hit a rock and Edward's escort cursed. A brief glimpse of a figure running across the track was all the moment allowed, but it gave Edward a strange optimism. He remembered how his father had said that help sometimes comes in ways least expected. He wondered about the person, who they were, where they were going, and he wished he could taste the same freedom.